The deal, as far as I know, is that the IMF agreed to provide Ukraine with $17 billion in aid in 2 tranches over 2 years, with them, I think, getting $3 billion immediately. Well, that strikes me as being about half as much as they need.
To pay Russia.
Yeah. So this is...
Well, explain that part, to pay Russia.
Ukraine owes Russia a lot of back payments for gas that it's bought and didn't pay for. Then Ukraine tried to replace Russian coal with South African coal, and it didn't pay for that either. So nobody will sell to Ukraine because it's the most corrupt country in Europe. And Russia made a loan to Ukraine from the Russian Sovereign Fund, and there was a statement in this loan that if Ukraine's debt rises above, I think, something like 80% of its GDP, the entire $5 billion loan falls due immediately. So Ukraine may suddenly have to give its entire gold stock to Russia if the IMF doesn't give it enough. So the IMF did not give Ukraine enough to pay the debts that it owes Russia, and it's keeping it on a very short leash so that it could control it. Now, what kind of democracy can you have if your government is always in debt, always obliged to let your economic policy being dictated by the IMF and the World Bank, which means by the US Treasury, which means basically by NATO, by the American State Department politically. If you're kept on a short debt leash, democracy becomes meaningless.
But this is only until the debts are paid off. Then once the debts are paid off...
But they can never, they owe so much money, they can never pay it off because they can't export. The way you pay off a foreign debt is to earn foreign currency. Either they export, and Ukraine says, we're not going to export to Russia anymore. We're not going to export our resources to Russia so that it can invade us. We're not going to help its military industry. And nobody else wants their exports. So there's only one thing Ukraine has to export: half of its population. If you're between the ages of 20 or 30, you're going to be exported.
You do have many youth who are very interested in seeing their country invented again. It's been incredibly corrupt from day one.
Could you tell us what was wrong with Ukraine at this point? I mean, what are the youth upset about? What would they like to remake?
Well, living standards are incredibly low. So, for instance, per capita incomes are half of what they are in Poland. And so if you want to start a business, you have to engage in all these payoffs. So you have a population that largely is a consequence of its Soviet inheritance in terms of a reasonably good educational infrastructure having been left behind. I mean, they're fairly well educated and they want something better. Many of them have been to West Europe. And they want to know, why can't we have this? Why can't it be like this? And so the assumption is that if we implement these policies that the rest of the European Union has implemented, then we're going to look like Germany or Sweden. Well, the answer, of course, to that is that, well, it would be nice if it worked that way. But we really see only the last vestigial elements of this prosperous West Europe that was built after World War II on an entirely different set of economic policies. So people are confused. They see the prosperity that exists today in those countries, although again it's being undermined and eroded, but they assume that the policies that created that wealth are the ones that are being pitched to them now, when they are the exact opposite policies. I would counsel that people in Ukraine look at what happened with Mexico, with NAFTA, in the mid-1990s when it was introduced. People thought that it was going to bring about this great prosperity for people, that wages would increase, that inequality would be reduced, that they would converge with Canada and the United States. Well, it didn't happen. It actually got worse for Mexican labor. This is what's being introduced. The EU association agreement is more like a NAFTA than it is the policies that were introduced in post-World War II Europe.
I spoke to some people in Ukraine over the last week, and I want to read what was said by a reporter over there. The issue was whether these loans being offered by the IMF and the World Bank are innocuous, or whether they're something else. He says, the country needs the IMF assistance package. The alternative is default. The idea is that there's no alternative. We need the help from Europe. and they mean what they say.
You might be able to make a case for austerity and foreign investment and the linkage between the two. If what you had was a situation in which foreign companies were coming in and partnering with Ukrainian firms in order to help build up Ukraine's national economy. But that's not what we have, I think. What it looks more like is that you have these foreign enterprises that are looking to extract wealth from Ukraine rather than add wealth to it. So this means that people themselves are not going to benefit. All they're going to experience is a lot of pain.
Rather than saying there is no alternative, default is the alternative. Ukraine, Russia, and other post-Soviet economies can say, we were tricked. You promised to make us solvent. Unfortunately, you've made a very bad loans. We're sorry about that, but we're going to make a new start like we should have back then. And we're going to do exactly what the Allies did in Germany in 1948, a clean slate. Wipe out all of the domestic debts and let's start again. If it's a choice between paying the foreign bankers or supporting our own national survival, any country is going to go for survival, and you're asking us to commit financial suicide. The IMF crushed democracy in Ukraine, crushed any chance of Ukrainians to make their own policy. Finance is basically achieving what war used to achieve. Finance is the American mode of warfare, not in the military sphere, but purely financial. It's America's form of warfare against democracy.